My name is Nora Bennett, and at 28 years old, I thought I'd seen every way my family could take advantage of me. I dragged myself up the stairs to my apartment after a brutal 12-hour shift at the hospital, my scrubs still smelling like antiseptic and my feet screaming in protest. All I wanted was to collapse into bed, but first I needed to move my car from the visitor spot to my assigned space. I grabbed my keys and headed back down, but when I reached the parking lot, my stomach dropped. My 2-year-old Subaru Outback was gone. Completely gone. I stood there in the dim lamplight, blinking hard, wondering if exhaustion was making me hallucinate. Had it been stolen? Towed? I fumbled for my phone and called the one place I thought would offer comfort. When my father answered, I barely got the words out before he said casually, like he was discussing the weather, "Oh, we lent it to Clayton. He needed reliable transportation for his new sales job interviews." The world tilted sideways. Before we dive into how everything fell apart, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever dealt with family members who think your stuff is their stuff, hit that like button so I know I'm not alone. And please subscribe because this story gets worse before it gets better, and you won't want to miss what happened when I finally fought back. Trust me. The next part will make your blood boil just like mine did that night. I need you to understand something about my family before this makes any sense. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and from the time I turned 14, I became the responsible one by default. While my siblings got to be kids, I worked part-time at a grocery store to buy my own school supplies and clothes. My parents always had some financial emergency that meant my needs came last, if they came at all. When college rolled around, they sat me down and explained that they simply couldn't help with tuition. Fair enough, I thought. Plenty of people put themselves through school. So I did. I worked full-time as a nursing assistant while taking classes full-time, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, living on ramen and coffee. It took me 6 years instead of 4, but I graduated with my nursing degree and minimal debt. The day I got my first real paycheck as an RN, I didn't celebrate with friends or take a trip. I opened a savings account and started putting away money for a car because I'd been riding the bus and bumming rides for years. 2 years of disciplined saving later, I walked into that dealership and paid cash for my Subaru Outback. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I chose the color, I signed the papers, I paid every penny myself. That car represented something my family never gave me: independence and achievement earned through my own sweat. My brother Clayton is 3 years younger than me, and he's been the golden child since birth. I'm not exaggerating when I say my parents have made excuses for him his entire life. He dropped out of college the first time because he needed to find his passion. They welcomed him home, no questions asked, and he lived rent-free for a year playing video games. When he decided to try again at a different school, they helped him with tuition, something they never offered me. He dropped out again after 1 semester, because the professor had it out for him. Back home he came, and back to the basement he went. Over the years, Clayton has tried his hand at retail, where he was fired for attendance issues. He worked at 3 different restaurants, never lasting more than 4 months because the managers were unreasonable. He got hired at an insurance company and quit after 2 weeks because cold calling was soul-crushing. For the past 6 months, had been completely unemployed, sleeping until noon, contributing nothing to the household, and my parents just kept saying he was finding his direction and needed support during this difficult time. Meanwhile, my sister Juliet, who's 26, got married and moved 2 states away. She barely calls and never gets involved in family drama. Then there's Maxwell, the baby at 23, who's in graduate school studying engineering. My parents are helping him with living expenses and even bought him a laptop for school. But me? I've never gotten a dime. Not for college, not for my car, not for anything. And honestly, I made peace with that years ago. What I couldn't accept anymore was how they took my self-sufficiency and twisted it into an excuse to exploit me. The pattern had been escalating for years, but I was too deep in it to see clearly. 2 years ago, Clayton got evicted from an apartment he'd been sharing with friends. My parents called me in a panic, asking if I could loan them $1,200 to cover his back rent so it wouldn't go to collections and ruin his credit. I was 26, still building my own emergency fund. But they made it sound so dire. I transferred the money that same day. They promised to pay me back within 3 months. That was 2 years ago, and I've never seen a penny of it. When I gently brought it up once, my mother looked at me like I'd slapped her and said, "We're family, Nora. We don't keep score." Last year, they volunteered me to host Thanksgiving for the entire extended family without asking first. When I protested that my apartment was small and I was working holiday shifts, my mother said, "But you're so capable, honey. You always pull things off beautifully." Translation: we don't want to do it, so you will. I hosted 23 people in my one-bedroom apartment and spent $500 on food. No one offered to reimburse me. 6 months ago, Clayton wanted to rent an apartment closer to the city. My parents asked if I'd co-sign the lease since his credit was terrible and he had no steady income. That time, I finally said no. I'd been seeing a therapist for 3 months by then, working through family dynamics and people-pleasing tendencies. My therapist had warned me that setting boundaries would be met with resistance, and she was right. My father didn't speak to me for 2 weeks, and my mother kept sending passive-aggressive texts about how disappointed she was in my selfishness. But I held firm. That small victory gave me hope that maybe I could change this dynamic. Then they took my car, and I realized they'd never respected my boundaries at all. They were just waiting for another opportunity to cross them. The words kept echoing in my head as I stood in that parking lot. We lent it to Clayton. Not asked. Not borrowed. Lent. Like they had any right to make that decision. I could barely form sentences as I asked my father to explain what he meant. His tone was defensive from the start, like I was the unreasonable one for being confused. "It's just a car, Nora. Family helps family. Clayton has 3 job interviews scheduled this week, and he needs to make a good impression. Our car is 15 years old and makes strange noises. We couldn't let him drive that to interviews with important companies. We knew you'd understand because you always do. We used the spare key you gave us for emergencies and picked it up this afternoon while you were at work." Each sentence hit me like a physical blow. My mother got on the line, and her voice had that saccharine sweet quality that always preceded manipulation. "Why are you being so selfish, sweetheart? This is exactly the kind of opportunity Clayton needs to turn his life around. Surely you can manage without your car for a little while. You're resourceful. You always figure things out." I tried to explain through the anger building in my chest that I needed my car for 12-hour shifts that started at 6 in the morning, for grocery shopping, for my life. The bus didn't run early enough to get me to work on time. Ride shares would cost me a fortune. This wasn't some minor inconvenience. This was them stealing my property, because that's what it was, theft. My father's voice hardened. "Don't be dramatic. It's not stealing when it's family. You're acting like we committed some crime. We're helping your brother get his life together, which should matter to you if you cared about this family at all. You can take the bus, like millions of people do. You can use Uber. You make decent money. This isn't the hardship you're making it out to be." My mother chimed in with her favorite tactic, the guilt trip from the past. "After everything we did for you growing up, putting a roof over your head and food on the table, this is how you react when we need a small favor? Juliet would never make such a fuss over something like this. She understands what family means." I demanded they return my car immediately. I demanded an apology. I demanded they acknowledge they'd violated a massive boundary by taking my property without permission. They refused every single point. My father launched into a justification that made my skin crawl. "Clayton has 3 interviews this week, Nora. 3 real opportunities with reputable companies. If he doesn't have reliable transportation, he'll miss his chance and end up back in that basement for who knows how long. Is that what you want? Your brother stuck in limbo because you couldn't share your car for a few weeks." A few weeks? He said weeks, not days. This wasn't a quick favor. They were planning to keep my car indefinitely. My mother added her own twisted logic. "We knew you'd be upset at first, which is why we didn't ask. We knew you'd say no even though it's the right thing to do, and we couldn't let Clayton miss this chance because you were being stubborn. Sometimes parents have to make hard decisions. We figured once you calmed down and thought about it rationally, you'd see we did the right thing." She actually said that. They took my car because they knew I'd refuse permission, so they just bypassed my consent entirely. The conversation spiraled as I asked the question that would haunt me. When exactly are you planning to return my car? The silence stretched for 3 long seconds before my father answered. When Clayton gets a job and can afford to buy his own car, it wouldn't make sense to disrupt his interview process by taking away his transportation right when he's gaining momentum. Once he's employed and saves up enough for a down payment on something used, well, make sure you get your car back. My vision actually blurred with rage. They had no timeline, no specific date, no plan beyond using my property until they decided I could have it back, and the audacity of acting like they were doing me a favor by eventually returning what they'd stolen. I asked how they even got into my apartment building, and my mother reminded me that I'd given them a spare key for emergencies. What if you got hurt or sick and we needed to check on you? What if there was a fire or a flood and we needed to save your important documents? You gave us that key for family reasons, and this is a family matter. They'd taken emergency access and weaponized it against me. When I pointed out that they could have at least discussed this with me first, given me a chance to prepare alternative transportation, maybe worked out some kind of agreed schedule, my father's voice took on that edge that meant he was done with the conversation. We're not going to argue about this anymore, Nora. The decision is made. Clayton has your car. He needs it more than you do right now. You're capable enough to figure out other options. That's what being an adult means, solving problems instead of complaining about them. Now I suggest you adjust your attitude and support your brother during this important time in his life. Well, talk again when you're being reasonable. And then he hung up on me. My own father hung up on me for objecting to my car being stolen. I stood in that parking lot until after midnight, calling rideshare after rideshare trying to find one that would take me to work in 6 hours, crying so hard I could barely see my phone screen. That night, something fundamental broke inside me. Not my spirit, but my willingness to accept this treatment. I'd spent 28 years being the capable one, the one who figured it out, the one who never needed help, and all it had gotten me was a family that felt entitled to everything I'd worked for while giving me nothing in return. My alarm went off at 5 in the morning, and reality hit immediately. No car. I'd managed to find a rideshare driver willing to pick me up that early, but it cost me $32 for a trip that normally took me 20 minutes and a quarter tank of gas. I made it to the hospital 15 minutes late, earning a written warning from my supervisor who'd never had cause to discipline me before. I tried to explain about the car situation, but how do you tell your boss that your parents stole your vehicle without sounding completely unprofessional? I mumbled something about unexpected transportation issues and promised it wouldn't happen again, even though I had no idea how to keep that promise. My coworker Bethany noticed I was off during our shift. I usually handled the chaos of the emergency department with calm efficiency, but that day I kept making small mistakes, forgetting to chart things immediately, snapping at a resident who asked a perfectly reasonable question. During our lunch break, she cornered me in the break room and asked what was wrong. The whole story came pouring out, every detail about my parents, my brother, my missing car, the years of being taken advantage of, everything. I expected her to tell me I was overreacting or that family is complicated or some other platitude that people use to avoid taking sides. Instead, Bethany's eyes went wide with horror. Nora, that's theft. Like actual, legal theft. You know that, right? She pulled out her phone and started looking things up. It doesn't matter that they're your parents. They took your property without permission. You could call the police right now and report your car stolen, and you'd be completely within your rights. The thought had occurred to me in the middle of the night, but hearing someone else say it made it real. Call the police on my own family. Report my parents and brother for stealing my car. The nuclear option that would detonate whatever remained of our relationship. Bethany must have seen the conflict on my face because she reached across the table and grabbed my hand. I know it sounds extreme, but what they did is extreme. You're not the one escalating. They escalated when they committed a crime against you. You're just responding appropriately to their actions. She offered to carpool with me temporarily, but she lived 40 minutes in the opposite direction from the hospital. Her helping me would mean she'd be adding nearly 3 hours to her own commute every day. I couldn't accept that. I thanked her for the offer and for validating that I wasn't crazy for being upset. That validation mattered more than she knew. For years, my family had conditioned me to believe I was selfish for wanting basic respect. Hearing someone outside that dynamic confirm I was right felt like oxygen after drowning. That afternoon, I tried texting Clayton directly, hoping to bypass our parents and appeal to whatever brotherly affection might still exist between us. "You're driving my car without asking me. Did you really think that was okay?" His response came 20 minutes later, casual to the point of insulting. "Mom and Dad said you were cool with it. They said you volunteered to let me borrow it for interviews." "Thanks, sis. I really appreciate it." I stared at that text in disbelief. They'd lied to him, made it seem like this was my idea, that he'd generously offered my car to support his job search. When I sent back a screenshot of my conversation with Dad, proving they'd taken the car without permission, Clayton's tune changed slightly, but not enough. "Okay, well, they should have asked you first, I guess. But I really need this, Nora. I have interviews lined up. I can't reschedule them now. Can't you just deal with it for a couple weeks? You're always so good at managing stuff. I'm sure you can figure out the bus schedule or whatever." This is kind of a big deal for me. Not a single apology. Not even an acknowledgement that he was benefiting from something taken from me against my will. Just an expectation that I should sacrifice my convenience for his benefit. Exactly like our parents taught him. The daily struggles mounted faster than I'd anticipated. Grocery shopping became an ordeal involving 2 bus transfers and carrying heavy bags for 6 blocks because the bus stop wasn't near my apartment. I missed a doctor's appointment I'd scheduled 3 months in advance because I misjudged how long the commute would take and arrived 30 minutes late, too late for them to see me. I spent $80 on rideshares in just 3 days, watching my carefully maintained budget collapse. My sleep schedule fell apart because I had to wake up 2 hours earlier to account for public transit delays and connections. The physical exhaustion from 12-hour nursing shifts compounded with the mental exhaustion of scrambling for transportation every single day. I found myself crying in the shower before work, crying on the bus, crying in the hospital bathroom during breaks. The stress was destroying me, and my family didn't care. They got what they wanted, which was Clayton having access to a reliable car, and my suffering was irrelevant as long as their golden child benefited. Then came the social media gut punch. My sister Juliet posted in our family group chat, the one I usually muted but checked occasionally, "So great, Clayton is getting interviews. Proud of you, little bro." Attached was a photo that made my vision go red. Clayton posing next to my Subaru, one hand on the hood, wearing a new suit I knew our parents had probably bought him, grinning like he'd accomplished something. My car, my property, my achievement. And he was using it as a prop for social media validation. Our parents had liked and commented with heart emojis and encouragements. Maxwell added, "Looking sharp, man. You got this." Not one person in that thread mentioned the car belonged to me. Not one person acknowledged that Clayton was only able to take those interviews because they'd stolen my transportation. The entire family was celebrating his opportunity while completely erasing my sacrifice, as if the car had just magically appeared for his use. I left the group chat. I couldn't stomach watching them all congratulate each other for my exploitation. That night, after another expensive rideshare home and another evening of eating cereal for dinner because I couldn't get to the grocery store, I broke down completely. I sat on my bathroom floor, still in my scrubs, and sobbed until my ribs ached. Not just about the car, though that was the catalyst. I cried for every time it'd been overlooked, every time my accomplishments had been dismissed, every time it'd been expected to handle things alone while my siblings got support and celebration. I cried for the little girl who'd worked at 14 while her friends went to movies. I cried for the college student who'd survived on 4 hours of sleep and ramen while her brother got to find himself on the couch. I cried for the adult woman who'd finally saved enough to buy something meaningful, only to have it stolen by the people who were supposed to protect her. And somewhere in that breakdown, something shifted. The grief crystallized into rage, and the rage hardened into resolve. This pattern would never change unless I changed it. My family would keep taking and taking because I kept allowing it. Bethany's words echoed in my head. They escalated when they committed a crime against you. You're just responding appropriately to their actions. Maybe it was time to respond. 3 days after my car disappeared, I received an email notification from my insurance company. There'd been a claim filed on my policy. My heart stopped because I hadn't been in any accident. I called the insurance company immediately, and the representative explained that a claim had been filed for a minor rear-end collision. The other driver's vehicle had sustained $2,800 in damage. My policy would cover it, minus my deductible, but I should be aware that my rates would increase at renewal. I was barely breathing as I asked when and where this accident had occurred. The representative gave me the date, 2 days ago, and a location I'd never been to, a shopping center 40 minutes from my apartment. Someone had been driving my car and had rear-ended another vehicle at a traffic light. That someone was obviously Clayton. I called him immediately, and this time, I didn't bother with polite texts. When he answered, I didn't let him speak. "You had an accident in my car. You rear-ended someone. My insurance is covering $2,800 in damage, my rates are going up, and you didn't tell me. Explain right now." There was a long pause, and then Clayton sighed like I was inconveniencing him. "It was just a little bump, Nora. I tapped their bumper at a red light. Not even hard. The guy was totally overreacting about the damage. I was going to tell you, but Mom and Dad said not to worry you about it since there was nothing you could do anyway. The insurance is handling it." My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. "Nothing I could do?" "It's my car, Clayton. My insurance. My rate's going up. I had a right to know immediately. And who's paying my deductible? Who's covering the rate increase that's going to cost me about $600 extra per year for the next 3 years?" Another pause. "I don't have that kind of money right now, Nora. I'm unemployed, remember? That's why I needed the car in the first place. Look, accidents happen. It could have happened to anyone. Stop being so uptight about every little thing." I called my parents next, and my mother answered with that fake cheerful voice that meant she knew exactly why I was calling. Before she could launch into deflection, I laid it out. Clayton had an accident in my car. Caused $2,800 in damage. My insurance is covering it, but my deductible is $1,000 and my rates are going up $600 a year for 3 years. That's almost $3,000 in total cost to me. He told me you advised him not to tell me. Is that true?" My mother's voice shifted to wounded innocence. "We didn't want to worry you, sweetheart. You're so stressed lately, and there was nothing you could have done about it after the fact. The insurance handled everything properly. Why are you so focused on punishing Clayton for an honest mistake? Accidents happen. It could have happened to you just as easily." I cut her off. "But it didn't happen to me. It happened to him, while he was driving my car that he took without my permission. Someone needs to pay for the deductible and the rate increase. If he can't afford it, then you and Dad need to cover it since you're the ones who gave him my car." My father got on the phone, and his tone was ice. "We're not paying for anything, Nora. We don't have an extra $3,000 lying around. Clayton made a small mistake. These things happen in life. You have insurance for exactly this reason. Your rates going up is just part of being a car owner. Stop trying to make everything into a crisis." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They'd enabled Clayton to take my car, had damaged it, and filed a claim on my insurance, and now they expected me to absorb all the financial consequences without complaint. When I pointed out that I was already spending hundreds on alternative transportation because they'd taken my car, my mother actually said, "Well, that was your choice. Nobody forced you to take Ubers. You could have adjusted your schedule to work with the bus." My choice. Like I'd chosen to have my car stolen. The gaslighting was so blatant I actually laughed. A bitter sound that made my mother go quiet. "Give me back my car today, or I'm reporting it stolen," I said clearly. My father's response was immediate and cold. "You do that, and you're out of this family permanently. We will never speak to you again. Is that really what you want over a car?" That conversation ended with my parents hanging up on me again, and me sitting in stunned silence as I calculated the financial damage. The insurance deductible, the rate increases, the ongoing transportation costs, and I hadn't even gotten to the maintenance my car probably needed after Clayton had been driving it hard for days. The number climbed past $5,000 easily. $5,000 I'd lose because my family felt entitled to my property and unwilling to face consequences for their actions. But then my phone rang again, and it was my insurance company with a detail I hadn't known to ask about. The representative wanted to confirm my current address because they'd received some paperwork with a different address listed. I confirmed my apartment address, and the representative sounded confused. That's strange. We have documentation here for a title loan on your vehicle, listing an address in the suburbs. My blood went cold. What title loan? I never took out a title loan. The representative put me on hold, and when she came back, her voice was concerned. Mr. Bennett, I'm seeing here that a title loan was originated 2 weeks ago through Quick Cash Loans for $3,500 using your Subaru as collateral. The signature on file is yours. I could barely form words. I'm not Mr. Bennett. I'm Miss Bennett. And I never signed anything or took out any loan. Someone forged my signature. The representative went quiet, then said, "She'd need to investigate this as potential fraud," and would call me back. I sat frozen on my couch, pieces clicking into place. 2 weeks ago was exactly when my parents still had access to my apartment with that emergency key. They'd taken my car registration and title from my filing cabinet. They'd forged my signature on a title loan application. They'd borrowed $3,500 using my car as collateral, and I had no doubt where that money went. When I called my parents back, I didn't yell. I spoke with deadly calm. You took out a title loan on my car. $3,500 with my forged signature. That's fraud. And it's a crime. Where did the money go? My mother started crying immediately, which was her go-to manipulation when caught. My father tried anger. We needed money for Clayton's interview wardrobe and expenses. Professional clothes are expensive. We were going to pay the loan back before you ever knew about it. I asked how they planned to pay back a loan when they claimed not to have $3,000 for my deductible and rate increase. No answer. So let me get this completely straight, I said, my voice shaking now. You stole my car. You gave it to Clayton without asking. He had an accident that cost me thousands. You forged my signature to take out a loan on my car title. You gave that money to Clayton too. And now you expect me to handle all the financial fallout while you face zero consequences. Do I have that right? My father's response was unbelievable. It's family, Nora. Families help each other. If you can't understand that, then maybe you don't deserve to be part of this family. And just like that, I knew what I had to do. I took a personal day from work, something I'd never done in 3 years at the hospital except for actual illness. My supervisor approved it immediately, probably noticing that I'd been barely holding it together for the past week. I spent the morning researching attorneys who specialized in family law and theft cases. I found one with good reviews, a man named Garrett Walsh, who offered free consultations. His office was downtown, and I took the bus there, each stop feeling like I was traveling toward either freedom or complete family destruction. Mr. Walsh listened to my entire story without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and exhaled slowly. Miss Bennett, you have multiple criminal cases here. Your parents committed theft by taking your car without permission. They committed fraud and forgery by taking out a title loan with your forged signature. Your brother is in possession of stolen property. You could report all of this to the police right now, and charges would likely be filed. His expression was kind but serious. However, I need to be very clear with you. Going that route will almost certainly destroy your family relationships permanently. Your parents could face jail time for the fraud. Is that an outcome you're prepared for? I'd thought about nothing else during the bus ride over. Was I prepared to potentially send my parents to jail? To have my brother arrested? To become the person my entire extended family would blame for tearing the family apart? I looked at Mr. Walsh and heard myself say, "They already destroyed the relationship. I'm just responding to what they did. They made these choices, not me." He nodded slowly. That's a healthy perspective. Let me lay out your options. Option 1 is criminal charges, which would be handled by the police and prosecutors. Option 2 is civil action, where you sue for damages and property return. Option 3 is a combination approach where you file a police report to create legal pressure but offer to drop charges if they meet specific restitution requirements. That third option made sense. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my car back, my money repaid, and boundaries enforced with real consequences if violated. Mr. Walsh drew up a quick outline of what we'd need. Police report documentation, insurance records, title loan paperwork, all communications with my family, and a detailed accounting of my financial damages. We spent 2 hours building the case, and by the time I left his office, I had a clear plan. First, file a police report for the stolen vehicle. The police would contact my parents and give them a choice: return the car immediately or face theft charges. Second, dispute the title loan as fraud, which would trigger an investigation. Third, demand full restitution of my financial damages, backed by the threat of a civil lawsuit. Mr. Walsh estimated my total damages at $8,300 when we included everything: insurance deductible, rate increases, transportation costs, and stress-related expenses. He'd represent me on contingency, meaning he'd only get paid if we won. I signed the retainer agreement with hands that shook from adrenaline, not fear. For the first time in my life, I was protecting myself with the same energy I'd always used to protect everyone else. It felt terrifying and powerful in equal measure. The police station was less dramatic than I'd imagined from TV shows. The officer at the front desk directed me to file an online report for non-emergency theft, but when I explained the title loan fraud component, she called over a detective. Detective Morrison was a woman in her 40s who listened to my story with increasing concern. "This is more complex than a standard theft," she said. "The family relationship complicates things, but the forged loan is clear-cut fraud. Let's start with the stolen vehicle report and go from there." She took my statement, photographed all my documentation, and explained the process. They'd contact my parents within 24 hours and inform them that a theft report had been filed. My parents would have the option to return the vehicle immediately, which would result in no charges being filed, or refuse to return it, which would escalate to criminal theft charges. As for the title loan, that would require a separate fraud investigation that could take weeks. Detective Morrison looked at me with something like sympathy. "I know this is hard. Family cases always are. But you're doing the right thing. No one has the right to forge your signature and steal your property, family or not." I left the police station and sat on a bench outside for 20 minutes, trying to absorb what I'd just done. I'd filed a police report against my parents. I'd started a fraud investigation that could result in criminal charges. I'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. My phone was in my hand, and I stared at it, waiting for the inevitable explosion. It came exactly 2 hours later. My mother called, and her voice was so shrill I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "How could you? How could you call the police on your own brother? On your family? You're destroying this family over a car." "A car, Nora. Material possessions matter more to you than your own flesh and blood." She was sobbing between words, playing the victim so hard I could practically hear the performance. When she paused for breath, I said calmly, "You stole my car. You forged my signature on a loan. Those are crimes. I'm responding to crimes you committed. This is your fault, not mine." She hung up, and immediately my father called. His approach was different, pure anger, with no tears. "You're dead to this family. You hear me? Dead. You just destroyed any relationship we had. When you're old and alone with no family, remember this moment. Remember that you chose a car over the people who raised you. You're selfish and cruel, and I want nothing to do with you." I'd expected this, but hearing it still hurt. "Give back my car within 24 hours, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "and drop this story that I'm the villain. You committed crimes against me. Face the consequences." He hung up, and then the flying monkeys descended. Clayton called crying, actually sobbing, saying I was ruining his life and destroying his chances at employment. Juliet texted a long message about how extreme this was, and couldn't I just share for a few weeks. Maxwell called asking if I'd lost my mind and explaining that the family was falling apart because of my overreaction. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't heard from in years started messaging me on social media, all saying variations of the same thing. I was destroying the family, I was being selfish, I was choosing material things over relationships. I was the problem. I blocked 27 phone numbers that evening. I wrote a detailed email to the extended family members who seemed genuinely confused rather than attacking, explaining the full situation: the theft, the accident, the forged loan, the thousands in damages, the pattern of exploitation. Most of them didn't respond. A few sent back messages suggesting I was exaggerating or being dramatic. Only two. A cousin I barely knew and an aunt on my father's side wrote back saying they believed me and supported my decision. That support meant everything in that moment. My therapist had an emergency opening when I called her office in tears, and she spent the session reminding me of something crucial. You're not responsible for their feelings about facing consequences for their actions. They're angry because you stopped enabling them. That anger is their problem, not yours. She asked what would have happened if I'd done nothing, and I realized they'd still have my car. I'd still be spending money on transportation. The loan would still be in my name, and they'd already be planning the next way to exploit me. At least this way, I was fighting for myself. 19 hours after the police contact, Clayton dropped my Subaru in my apartment parking lot. No phone call, no knock on my door, just keys pushed through the mail slot with no note. I went downstairs and found my car, and my stomach sank. The gas tank was empty. The interior was trashed with fast food bags, coffee cups, and what looked like mud tracked all over the floor mats. There was a new dent on the rear bumper, presumably from the accident, but also scratches down the passenger side that hadn't been there before. The registration and insurance documents I kept in the glove box were missing. The car had over 2,000 miles added in 3 weeks. They'd driven it hard, used it carelessly, and returned it like garbage. But it was back. And that was something. I sat in the driver's seat, my hands on the steering wheel, and felt the smallest bit of control return. The battle wasn't over. The title loan was still in my name, the financial damages were still mounting, and my entire family still saw me as the villain. But I had my car back, and I had legal representation. And I had proof that setting boundaries with consequences actually worked. For the first time in my life, I'd stood up to my family and won something back. It felt like standing up after being knocked down for 28 years. Shaky, uncertain, but standing. Getting my car back should have been the end of it, but my family wasn't done. 2 days after Clayton returned the Subaru, my mother started calling me from different numbers since I'd blocked her cell. She'd use my aunt's phone, neighbors' phones, even calling from the landline at their house that I'd forgotten existed. Each time I answered thinking it was someone else, her voice would assault me with the same script. You need to drop the police report immediately. You got your car back. There's no reason to keep this going. You're trying to send your family to jail over nothing. How can you live with yourself? When I explained that the title loan fraud was still unresolved and I was still owed over $8,000 in damages, she'd start crying and hang up. My father took a different approach, sending emails to my work address, which felt like a violation of another boundary. The emails were long, rambling attempts at rewriting history. In his version of events, they'd borrowed my car with my implicit permission because I was always generous with family. Clayton had a minor fender bender that could have happened to anyone. The title loan was a misunderstanding where they'd assumed they had my permission since they'd helped me so much over the years. Every email ended with demands that I drop the police report and stop dragging the family name through the mud. The smear campaign on social media intensified in ways I hadn't anticipated. My mother posted a vague Facebook status that said, "Heartbroken when your own children turn their backs on you over material possessions." We raised her better than this. Praying for her soul. It got 73 likes and dozens of comments from people who had no idea what actually happened, all saying things like, "So sorry you're going through this," and "Some kids just don't appreciate their parents." I didn't respond or defend myself publicly because my attorney advised against it, but watching my character be assassinated in real time while I stayed silent was torture. Then my mother shared an article about adult children who abandon their aging parents and added, "This is my reality now." She was 54 years old, hardly aging and certainly not abandoned, but the narrative was set. Community members from our hometown, who'd known me as a child, started messaging me with concerned questions about why I was treating my parents so badly. The gossip spread to my workplace when a nurse I barely knew approached me in the break room and asked if everything was okay with my family because she'd heard some concerning things. Clayton's victim narrative became increasingly elaborate and divorced from reality. He told everyone who would listen that he'd finally gotten his life together, had 3 job offers lined up, and I'd sabotaged everything by having him arrested, which hadn't actually happened, and taking back the car just when he needed it most. According to his version, shared liberally on social media and apparently to anyone he encountered, had lost all 3 job opportunities because of the car drama, though the timeline didn't make sense since Head had the car for 3 full weeks. He never mentioned the accident Head caused, the loan they'd forged in my name, or the fact that Head been driving stolen property. He positioned himself as the hard-working younger brother destroyed by his vindictive, selfish sister who couldn't stand to see him succeed. Friends from high school who I hadn't talked to in years started unfollowing me on Instagram. Former coworkers from my nursing assistant days sent messages saying they were disappointed in how I was treating family. The lies spread faster than I could ever hope to correct them, and I realized that the truth didn't matter to most people. They wanted a simple story with a clear villain, and my family had handed them one. Me. Then something unexpected happened. My sister Juliet called me at 11 at night, which was strange because she rarely called at all, let alone late. When I answered cautiously, expecting another attack, her voice was quiet and tired. "Nora, I need to tell you something I should have said weeks ago. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't defend you publicly." She took a shaky breath. "Mom and Dad did the same thing to me 6 years ago. Not with a car, but with money. They took out a credit card in my name when I was in college, ran up $8,000 in debt buying stuff for Clayton and Maxwell, and then expected me to pay it off. When I confronted them, they said family helps family, and I was being selfish. It destroyed my credit for years. That's part of why I moved so far away. I couldn't be near them anymore." I was stunned. Juliet had never mentioned any of this. "Why didn't you warn me?" I asked, not with anger but genuine confusion. She sighed. "Because I convinced myself it was a one-time thing, that they'd learned their lesson, and I didn't want to admit to myself that our parents are actually just toxic people who exploit their kids. I'm sorry. What they did to you is criminal, and you're right to pursue legal action. I should have said that from the beginning instead of telling you to just share." Juliet's validation cracked something open in me. For weeks I'd been questioning whether I was overreacting, whether I was truly destroying the family over something petty, whether I was the selfish monster everyone said I was. Hearing my sister confirm that this was a pattern, that she'd been victimized too, that I wasn't crazy for drawing hard lines, it was like oxygen after suffocating. We talked for 2 hours that night. She told me more stories about how our parents had manipulated her, how they'd used money she'd saved for a deposit on her first apartment to pay Clayton's credit card bills when he was 19, how they'd borrowed her car multiple times without asking and returned it damaged. She'd never fought back the way I was fighting. She'd just fled across state lines and maintained minimal contact. "I admire what you're doing," she said. "I was too scared to stand up to them. But you're doing it, and even though they're making your life hell right now, you're going to come out of this free in a way I never have been." Maxwell surprised me even more. My youngest brother showed up at my apartment on a Saturday morning with coffee and bagels, looking nervous. I almost didn't let him in, assuming he was there to yell at me on behalf of our parents, but something in his face made me open the door. He sat on my couch and said, "I know I'm supposed to be on their side, and I told them I was, but I need to tell you the truth. You're right, about everything." He proceeded to tell me that He'd been watching how they treated me differently my entire life. He'd noticed how they praised me for being capable while actually just neglecting my needs. Had seen how Clayton got away with everything while I got punished for the smallest mistakes. I'm financially dependent on them for graduate school, he admitted, so I can't publicly support you because they'd cut me off immediately. But I needed you to know that I see what's happening. What they did was wrong. Taking your car. Forging that loan. It's criminal. And I'm scared because I graduate next year, and once I don't need their money anymore, I think they're going to turn on me too. How do I protect myself? We spent the morning talking about boundaries, separate bank accounts, keeping documents secure, never giving them emergency access to anything. Maxwell left with a plan and a promise that once he was independent, he'd tell our parents exactly what he thought of how they'd treated me. The title loan situation finally got the attention it deserved when the loan company's fraud investigation turned up clear evidence of forgery. A handwriting analyst compared the signature on the loan documents to my actual signature on my driver's license and nursing license. They didn't match. The loan company called my parents demanding immediate payment of the full loan amount plus interest, which totaled just over $4,000 now, or they'd pursue legal action for fraud. My mother called me from my grandmother's phone, which I answered thinking my grandmother was sick or something had happened. Instead, my mother's voice was panicked, not angry. Nora, please, you have to make this go away. They're threatening to sue us and press charges. We don't have $4,000. Please call them and tell them. It was all a misunderstanding. For the first time, they were genuinely scared of real consequences. You forged my signature, I said coldly. You committed fraud. The loan company is responding exactly how they should. If you don't have the money, then I guess you'll have to deal with the legal consequences of committing a crime. She started begging. Actually begging. But I hung up. My attorney was delighted with this development because it strengthened our leverage. Mr. Walsh sent my parents a formal letter outlining all their legal violations and the financial damages they'd caused me, which now totaled $8,300 when we included everything. The letter gave them two options: agree to a structured repayment plan with legal enforcement and stay out of my life for a minimum of 6 months, or face both criminal prosecution for the fraud and a civil lawsuit for damages. They had 7 days to respond. For those 7 days, the harassment intensified. Family members I'd never met called to yell at me. My parents drove to my apartment building and buzzed my unit repeatedly until I threatened to call the police for harassment. Clayton sent me dozens of text messages saying I was ruining his life and he'd never forgive me, but I didn't cave. I forwarded every harassing message to my attorney, blocked every new number, and held my ground. When the 7 days were up, my parents' attorney, they'd hired one with money, I'm sure they borrowed from someone else, contacted Mr. Walsh with a counteroffer. They'd pay $3,000 total and wanted all legal matters dropped. Mr. Walsh called me to discuss it. It's less than you're owed, but it guarantees you something rather than risking a trial. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. No. They pay the full amount or we proceed with charges and lawsuit. They don't get to negotiate down the cost of committing crimes against me. 2 weeks after my attorney rejected their lowball offer, we found ourselves in a mediation session that their lawyer had requested. Mediation was a last-ditch effort to resolve everything outside of court, and my attorney had advised me that judges like to see parties attempt mediation before trial. The mediator was a woman named Vivian Torres who specialized in family disputes, and her office was in a building downtown that felt aggressively neutral: beige walls, uncomfortable chairs, terrible coffee. My parents arrived with their attorney, a man who looked exhausted already. Clayton came too, sullen and defensive, wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt like he'd made minimal effort. I brought Bethany for moral support, sitting in the waiting room outside, and my attorney Mr. Walsh sat beside me with his organized folders of evidence. My mother's eyes were red from crying. A tactical choice I recognized immediately. My father's jaw was set in that stubborn way that meant he still thought he was right. We sat across a conference table from each other, and the physical distance felt appropriate. Miss Torres opened with standard mediation language about good faith negotiations and finding mutually acceptable solutions. Then she asked each party to present their perspective on the situation. My parents' attorney went first, painting a picture of a misunderstanding between family members that had gotten out of hand. He claimed my parents had borrowed the car with the assumption of permission based on past family dynamics where sharing was normal. The title loan was described as an unfortunate error in judgment during financial stress, not fraud. Clayton was positioned as an innocent party caught in the middle who'd just been trying to improve his employment situation. The whole presentation took about 15 minutes and was essentially a sanitized version that stripped away all the criminal elements. When he finished, Miss Torres turned to my attorney, and Mr. Walsh pulled out his timeline. He laid out every single event chronologically with evidence. The car taken on a specific date without any request for permission, documented by the text messages ID sent my parents afterward expressing shock. Clayton driving the car for 3 weeks, confirmed by the mileage and his own social media posts. The accident on a specific date, documented by the insurance claim and police report from the scene. The title loan originated 2 weeks before the car was taken, documented by the loan company's records and the forged signature analysis. The total financial damages itemized down to the dollar. $1,000 insurance deductible, estimated $1,800 in increased insurance rates over 3 years, $1,200 in alternative transportation costs, $3,500 in the fraudulent loan that was in my name, plus interest and fees. Grand total, $8,300. Every claim was backed by documentation. Mr. Walsh presented it all dispassionately, like he was presenting evidence in court, because essentially he was. When he finished, Miss Torres looked at my parents' attorney and asked if he disputed any of the facts presented. The man glanced at his clients, and you could see the moment he realized he was defending the indefensible. My father tried to justify everything anyway. We were helping our son. That's what parents do. We saw an opportunity for Clayton to turn his life around, and yes, we made some mistakes in how we went about it, but our intentions were good. Families are supposed to share resources. Nora has always been independent and capable. We didn't think she'd need the car as much as Clayton did. The loan was, I'll admit, a bad decision made in desperation. But calling the police? Threatening us with jail time? That's vindictive. That's choosing legal action over family bonds. Miss Torres listened without expression, then asked, Mr. Bennett, did you ask your daughter for permission before taking her car? He hesitated. Not explicitly, but she cut him off. That's a yes or no question. Did you ask permission? He admitted. No. She continued. Did you sign your daughter's name on a loan document? Another pause. Yes, but we intended to pay it back. Miss Torres made a note. Intention doesn't negate the action. You forged her signature on a legal financial document. That's fraud regardless of intent. My mother broke down crying at that point, which I'd expected. She looked at Miss Torres with those tear-filled eyes and said, I'm a mother who wanted to help her son. Is that really so criminal? We've given everything to our children their whole lives, and now Nora wants to destroy us over a car and some money? Where's the forgiveness? Where's the understanding that parents make mistakes? I couldn't stay quiet anymore. You didn't make a mistake, I said, my voice shaking but firm. You made a series of deliberate choices. You took my emergency key and used it to steal my car. You forged my signature on a loan application. You gave the loan money to Clayton. You told him I'd given permission when I hadn't. Clayton had an accident and you told him not to tell me. Every single one of those was a choice, not a mistake. And this isn't about the car. It's about 28 years of you taking everything from me while giving me nothing and expecting me to be grateful for it. Miss Torres asked me to elaborate, so I did. I told her about working since I was 14, while my siblings got allowances. I told her about putting myself through college with no help, while Maxwell got tuition support. I told her about the $1,200 they borrowed for Clayton 2 years ago and never repaid. I told her about being expected to host holidays and provide emotional support while receiving none myself. I told her about the pattern of being praised as capable while actually being neglected. This car situation is just the most extreme example of something that's been happening my entire life, I said. They take and take because I've always let them. I'm not letting them anymore. That's why we're here. My mother tried to interrupt with denials. But Miss Torres held up a hand. Mrs. Bennett. Let her finish. I looked at my parents directly. You stole from me. You committed fraud against me. You cost me thousands of dollars. And you think I'm the villain because I won't just absorb it quietly like I've always done. I'm done being the family doormat. Clayton finally spoke up, his voice defensive and whiny. You're making this about way more than just the car. I needed help. Mom and Dad were helping me. You could have helped too. But instead you're trying to ruin all of us. I lost job opportunities because of this drama. Mr. Walsh interjected smoothly. Mr. Bennett, younger, you had the car for 3 full weeks before it was returned. According to your own social media posts, you attended at least 2 interviews during that time. The car being returned didn't prevent you from completing your interview process. Clayton's face flushed red. Well, the stress of all this made it hard to focus. Miss Torres wasn't having it. Sir, you were driving a vehicle that didn't belong to you, that was taken without the owner's permission. You were in possession of stolen property. You had an accident in that vehicle and failed to immediately notify the owner. You benefited from funds obtained through fraud. Your stress is a consequence of your choices and your parents' choices, not your sister's response to those choices. The room went silent for a long moment. My parents' attorney whispered something to them, probably advising them that this was going very badly. Miss Torres laid out what she called the reasonable resolution based on the evidence. My parents would repay the full $8,300 in damages over 18 months, which came to $500 per month with a legally binding contract. They would return any and all keys or access they had to my property. They would maintain no contact with me for a minimum of 6 months, unless I initiated it. In exchange, I would drop the criminal complaints and not pursue a civil lawsuit. She emphasized that this was significantly more generous than what a court would likely order, which would include legal fees on top of damages and could result in criminal records for both my parents and Clayton. The alternative to accepting these terms was proceeding to both criminal prosecution and civil court, where they'd almost certainly lose and face far worse consequences. My parents tried to negotiate. They couldn't afford $500 a month. Could we make it $300? No, my attorney said, because that would take over 2 years and they'd already demonstrated they couldn't be trusted to follow through on commitments. They didn't want the no-contact period because family shouldn't be kept apart, Miss Torres explained that the no-contact period was a boundary enforcement measure, that they'd proven they couldn't respect my boundaries, so legal enforcement was necessary. My father tried anger one more time, saying I was being unreasonable and vindictive. Miss Torres stopped him. Mr. Bennett, your daughter could press charges right now and you could be arrested for fraud. This agreement keeps you out of jail and gives you a manageable payment plan. I strongly suggest you take it. She gave them 15 minutes to discuss with their attorney in private. When everyone came back, my parents agreed to the terms with visible resentment. The payment plan would be legally enforceable, meaning if they missed a payment, I could immediately take them to court, and the judgment would be automatic. If they contacted me during the no-contact period except for logistics about payments, I could file for a restraining order. The only thing they refused was family therapy, which had been suggested by Miss Torres, but that was fine with me. I had no interest in therapy with people who'd never acknowledge what they'd done wrong. We all signed the mediation agreement, which was then filed with the court, making it legally binding. As we left the building, my mother tried one last guilt trip. I hope you're happy, Nora. You got what you wanted. You've torn this family apart. I looked at her and said, you tore it apart when you decided my property and my financial security mattered less than Clayton's convenience. I'm just refusing to pretend it didn't happen. And then I walked away with my attorney, feeling lighter than I had in months. The first payment arrived exactly 3 days before the deadline, a check for $500 with no note or any additional communication. I deposited it immediately and felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that the legal system was working, that my boundaries were being enforced with real consequences, that I was getting some financial justice. Sadness because this was what my family relationship had come to, legally mandated payments and court-ordered distance. My therapist helped me process that grief. You're mourning the family you wish you had, not the family you actually have, she explained. That's healthy. You needed to grieve the ideal before you could accept the reality. We increased my sessions to twice weekly because I was dealing with what she identified as family-related PTSD, nightmares about confrontations, anxiety when my phone rang, hypervigilance about my locked doors and car security. I started EMDR therapy to process the trauma. And slowly, the acute stress symptoms began to ease. The social consequences continued for months. Some extended family members reached out with apologies after learning the full story, usually from Juliet, who'd started quietly correcting the narrative when people asked her directly. But plenty of relatives remained convinced I'd overreacted and destroyed the family over a car and some money, as if those things hadn't represented my independence and financial security. I stopped going to family gatherings entirely. Thanksgiving that year, I stayed home alone and worked a hospital shift, which was honestly less stressful than sitting around a table with people who thought I was a villain. Christmas was similar. I picked up an extra shift and spent the holiday helping patients instead of pretending everything was fine with my family. It was lonely, but it was honest. And I was learning that honest loneliness felt better than fake connection. Clayton did eventually get a job, working in sales at a telecommunications company. I heard about it through Juliet, who'd maintained her role as the family Switzerland, neutral but informed. He never apologized to me, never acknowledged the damage he'd caused, never took responsibility for driving my car into someone else's vehicle or benefiting from the forged loan. According to Juliet, he told people at his new job that his sister was crazy and they didn't speak anymore because I had anger issues. The irony of him rewriting history while I stayed silent to protect the family reputation wasn't lost on me. My parents continued supporting him financially even while making their $500 payments to me, which told me everything about their priorities. They helped him buy professional clothes for his new job. They gave him money for a deposit on an apartment, and they co-signed a loan for him to buy a used car. Everything they claimed they couldn't do for me, they did for him without hesitation. Juliet became my closest family connection during this time. We talked on the phone weekly, processing our shared experiences and validating each other's trauma. She told me more stories I'd never heard, about times our parents had chosen Clayton over her, about money they'd taken and never repaid, about promises they'd broken and expectations they'd maintained that she should just deal with it. You know what the difference between us is, she said during one call. You fought back. I just ran away. I'm not sure which is healthier, but I admire that you stood up to them even when it cost you everything. I told her that running away was its own form of self-protection, that Shed saved herself the best way she knew how, and there was no shame in that. We made plans to visit each other, something we'd never done as adults, and I realized that losing my relationship with my parents had given me the chance to build a real relationship with my sister. Maxwell continued his graduate studies but started implementing the boundaries we'd discussed. He opened a new bank account at a completely different bank than our parents used. He got a P.O. box for important mail so they couldn't intercept anything sent to their house, where he still received some documents. He started saying no to small requests, testing how they'd react, preparing for the inevitable moment when they'd turn on him too. They're already making comments. Creator, he told me during a secret coffee meeting. Little digs about how I'm becoming difficult like you. They're conditioning me to fall in line, but I see it now. I see exactly what you were talking about. I gave him my attorney's contact information and told him to start documenting everything, just in case. He graduated that spring with his engineering degree and immediately accepted a job offer in Seattle, as far from our parents as he could get while staying in the continental United States. His goodbye text to me said, "Thank you for showing me it's possible to choose yourself over the family dysfunction. I'm finally free." I cried reading that, happy tears for once. My workplace became a sanctuary during all of this. My supervisor, who'd initially seemed concerned about my family legal troubles, called me into her office one day and told me her own story. She'd been estranged from her mother for 15 years after similar financial exploitation and boundary violations. The first few years are the hardest, she said. Everyone judges you for cutting off family, but eventually you build a chosen family that respects you, and it's so much better than biological family that harms you. You're doing the right thing, even when it feels awful. She became a mentor to me. And when a charge nurse position opened up in our emergency department, she encouraged me to apply. I got the promotion, partly because my supervisor advocated for me, but also because standing up to my family had given me a new confidence. I'd stopped being a people pleaser at home, and that translated to work. I advocated for myself in salary negotiations. I set boundaries with difficult doctors and administrators. I said no to extra shifts when I needed rest. The promotion came with a significant raise, which helped offset the money I'd lost to my family's exploitation and the ongoing therapy costs. My friendship with Bethany deepened into the kind of chosen family people talk about but I'd never really experienced. She invited me to her family's Thanksgiving, where her parents treated me like an honorary daughter and didn't pry about why I wasn't with my own family. We took a trip together to Nashville, just a weekend away, to celebrate my promotion and what she called my liberation from family toxicity. We stayed up late drinking wine and talking about our lives, our dreams, our fears, and I realized this was what sisterhood was supposed to feel like. Mutual support, honest communication, respect for boundaries, celebration of each other's successes. Everything my biological family had never given me. I started building a chosen family deliberately, investing in friendships that were reciprocal and healthy, creating traditions with people who actually valued me. My dating life had been non-existent during the family crisis, but about 9 months after the mediation, I started seeing someone. His name was Everett, and he was a paramedic I'd worked with occasionally in the emergency department. He asked me out for coffee, very casual, and I almost said no because I was still emotionally raw. But my therapist had been encouraging me to open myself up to new connections, so I agreed. Over coffee, I gave him the abbreviated version of my family situation, figuring it was better to be upfront about the drama. He listened carefully and then said, "So you set boundaries with people who were exploiting you, and they couldn't handle it, so they made you the villain. That's actually incredibly strong. Most people just accept the dysfunction because fighting it is too hard." He understood. He didn't think I was overdramatic or harsh, or any of the things my family had called me. We started dating slowly, both of us cautious because we'd been hurt before, and it was the healthiest relationship I'd ever had. Equal partnership, honest communication, respect for each other's independence, support without enmeshment. For the first time in my life, I was with someone who valued my capability but didn't exploit it. Financially, I started rebuilding my security with an almost obsessive focus. I created an emergency fund that my parents could never access. I changed all my passwords to things they couldn't guess. I removed them from every emergency contact list at my bank, my insurance, my work, everywhere. I froze my credit so no one could open accounts in my name. I put alerts on all my financial accounts so I'd be notified of any unusual activity. I transferred my car title to a secure location and got a new safe deposit box at a bank my parents didn't know about. Every precaution I took felt like reclaiming power they'd stolen from me. By the 1-year anniversary of getting my car back, my savings account was healthier than it had been before they'd stolen from me. The monthly payments from my parents helped, but mostly, it was about me being able to keep my money instead of it constantly being drained by their crises and demands. The biggest breakthrough came during a therapy session about 6 months into my recovery. My therapist asked me to close my eyes and imagine my childhood self, that 14-year-old girl working at the grocery store while her siblings played. "What does she need to hear?" my therapist asked. I started crying before I even opened my mouth, and then the words poured out. "You're not capable because you're special. You're capable because you had to be. They didn't give you a choice. Being self-sufficient wasn't your nature, it was your survival mechanism, and you deserved better. You deserved parents who supported you instead of exploiting you. You deserved to be protected and nurtured, not abandoned and praised for managing abandonment well." My therapist let me cry for a long time. And then she said, "Now you're giving yourself what they never did. You're protecting yourself. You're nurturing yourself. You're supporting yourself. That's not selfishness, that's healing." Something shifted in me that day, a fundamental reframing of my entire story. I wasn't the bad daughter who chose material things over family. I was the strong woman who finally chose herself after a lifetime of being last. 1 year after my car was stolen, I woke up in my apartment to sunshine streaming through the windows and a text from Everett asking if I wanted to grab brunch. My Subaru was parked safely in my spot outside, registered to me alone, secured and protected in ways it hadn't been before. I'd received 12 consecutive monthly payments from my parents, $6,000 toward the debt they owed me. We were 2/3 of the way through the repayment plan, and they'd never missed a deadline, probably because missing one would mean immediate legal action. I hadn't spoken to my parents in 12 months except for one email exchange about payment logistics. My father never acknowledged my birthday. My mother sent a Christmas card with no note inside, just her signature, like that fulfilled some obligation. Clayton got married to a girlfriend I'd never met, and I wasn't invited to the wedding. I heard through Juliet that my parents spent over $15,000 on the event, money they'd claimed they didn't have when I needed repayment. That told me everything I needed to know about their priorities and confirmed that I'd made the right choice. The holiday season was approaching again, my second one estranged from my biological family, and this time I felt no sadness about it. Bethany had invited me to spend Thanksgiving with her family again. Everett wanted me to meet his parents over Christmas. I was hosting a Friendsgiving potluck at my apartment with coworkers and friends who'd become my chosen family. These gatherings were filled with genuine warmth and laughter, not the underlying tension and resentment that had characterized every family holiday I'd attended before. I realized that forced family time had always been stressful. Walking on eggshells around my parents' moods, watching them dote on Clayton while barely acknowledging me, dealing with passive-aggressive comments disguised as concern. Authentic connections with people who actually liked and respected me felt completely different. For the first time in my adult life, I was actually looking forward to the holidays. My parents never truly apologized or took accountability beyond the forced payments. My mother occasionally sent text messages, despite the no-contact agreement, usually around holidays or birthdays. Families are supposed to forgive and forget. You've punished us enough. Can't we move past this? She framed everything like I was holding a grudge over a minor disagreement, not protecting myself from people who'd committed fraud against me. My father maintained complete silence, which honestly felt healthier than my mother's manipulation attempts. I'd stopped expecting change from them because my therapist had helped me understand a crucial truth. People only change when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of changing. For my parents, making monthly payments was annoying, but not painful enough to force self-reflection. They'd rather pay me off and maintain their victim narrative than actually examine their behavior and grow. I had to accept that and let go of any fantasy that they'd have some moment of clarity and apologize meaningfully. Clayton's life continued along its predictable path. He and his new wife had a baby within a year of getting married, and suddenly my parents were all over social media posting about their first grandbaby and how blessed they were. I wasn't mentioned in any of the posts, as if I didn't exist, which frankly was fine with me. According to Juliet, my parents were helping Clayton and his wife with childcare and money, constantly, babysitting multiple times a week, buying baby supplies, paying for things they claimed they couldn't afford when it came to repaying me. The total amount they'd given Clayton over the years, counting everything I knew about and suspected, easily exceeded $50,000. Meanwhile, they'd never given me a dime voluntarily, and the $8,300 they were paying me back was only happening under legal compulsion. The disparity was so stark it would be funny if it wasn't my actual life, but watching them continue to enable Clayton while I built a healthy, independent life made me grateful for the distance between us. Maxwell thrived in Seattle, sending me photos of his new apartment with mountain views and updates about his engineering projects. Head started dating someone who worked in environmental science, and they went hiking every weekend. I'm happy for the first time maybe ever, he told me during one of our phone calls. Being away from them, I can finally just be myself without worrying about their expectations or manipulations. You gave me permission to choose myself, and I'll never be able to thank you enough for that. He maintained minimal contact with our parents, calling them once a month out of obligation but keeping them at arm's length emotionally and physically. They'd already started making comments about him being distant and acting like Nora, which meant he was probably next on their list of kids to exploit and then vilify when he set boundaries. But he was prepared now in ways I hadn't been, and I knew he'd protect himself. Juliet and I made our annual trip happen, meeting in Denver for a long weekend. We went to museums, tried expensive restaurants we'd never normally go to, stayed up late talking about everything and nothing. She told me she'd started therapy too, processing her own family trauma, and that watching me fight back had inspired her to start doing her own healing work. I spent years running from them, she said. You spent years trying to please them. Neither worked. But now, we're both choosing ourselves, and that's what matters. We took a selfie on the last day of the trip, both of us genuinely smiling, and I posted it on Instagram with a caption about chosen family. My mother probably saw it. I didn't care. My relationship with Juliet had become real and mutual in a way it never was when we were both trying to survive our parents' dysfunction. Professionally, I continued to advance. The confidence it gained from standing up to my family translated into every area of my life. I led initiatives in the emergency department to improve patient care protocols. I mentored new nurses with genuine kindness, instead of the harsh criticism I'd received as a new grad. I negotiated for better staffing ratios and actually won that battle with hospital administration. My colleagues respected me not just for my clinical skills but for my leadership and advocacy. When I'd been enmeshed with my toxic family, I'd been too drained to bring my full self to work. Now, I had energy and passion for my career because I wasn't being emotionally vampired by people who didn't value me. The promotion and raise had been just the beginning. I was building a career I was proud of, not just a job I survived. My relationship with Everett deepened into something genuine and healthy. We moved in together after a year of dating, both of us nervous but excited. Living with him showed me what a functional partnership looked like. We split expenses fairly. We communicated about problems instead of letting resentment build. We supported each other's careers and friendships outside the relationship. We had boundaries with each other's families, and when I told him I didn't want to meet my parents or have them at any future life events, he supported that completely without trying to fix it or convince me to reconcile. Your peace matters more than their comfort, he said, echoing what my therapist had told me. I support whatever boundaries you need. Having a partner who respected my decisions instead of pressuring me to sacrifice my well-being for false peace was revolutionary. My Subaru became a symbol of everything I'd fought for and won back. Every time I sat in the driver's seat and turned the key, I felt a sense of ownership that went beyond legal title. This car represented my refusal to be exploited, my willingness to enforce boundaries even when it cost me everything, my commitment to protecting myself. I'd never lend it to anyone again without an ironclad written agreement. I'd never give anyone emergency access to my keys or my apartment. I'd learned that generosity without boundaries isn't virtue, it's self-destruction. And I'd learned that I didn't have to set myself on fire to keep other people warm, especially people who wouldn't even acknowledge they were cold unless it benefited them. The difference between forgiveness and reconciliation became clearer through therapy. My therapist explained that forgiveness is internal, something you do for your own peace, releasing the anger that hurts you more than it hurts them. Reconciliation is external, rebuilding a relationship with someone, and it requires both parties to change. I could forgive my parents for myself, letting go of the rage that was eating me alive, without reconciling with them. Forgiveness didn't mean allowing continued harm. It meant accepting that they were flawed people who'd hurt me, choosing to release the emotional charge around that hurt, and moving forward without them in my life. Reconciliation would require them to acknowledge what they'd done, apologize meaningfully, and demonstrate changed behavior over time. Since they'd done none of those things, reconciliation wasn't an option. And I was okay with that. Looking back at the scared, exhausted woman standing in that parking lot a year ago, discovering her car was gone, I barely recognized her. That version of me still believed that being capable meant absorbing whatever my family threw at me. She still believed that family bonds trumped personal boundaries. She still believed that speaking up about mistreatment was worse than the mistreatment itself. Over the past year, Id learned that real capability includes knowing when to say no. Family bonds mean nothing if they're used as chains, and silence about abuse only protects abusers. I'd learned to trust my instincts when something felt wrong instead of gaslighting myself into compliance. Id learned that people who genuinely love you don't steal from you, lie to you, or try to destroy you when you ask for basic respect. Id learned that loneliness is temporary, but self-betrayal leaves permanent scars. The final payment from my parents would arrive in 6 more months, completing the 18-month repayment plan. That check would represent justice, even if imperfect. They'd repaid the financial debt, though they'd never acknowledged the emotional debt they owed me. When that last payment cleared, I'd be completely free of any obligation to them. No more monthly reminders of what they'd done. No more waiting for checks. No more anything. Just clean separation and the life I'd built without them. I'd already decided I wouldn't reach out when the no-contact period ended. The court-ordered distance had become my chosen distance, and I intended to maintain it indefinitely. Maybe someday it'd feel differently, but I doubted it. They'd have to change fundamentally as people. Develop empathy and accountability they'd never shown, and I wasn't holding my breath for that transformation. If you've read this far and any of it resonates with your own family situation, I want you to know something important. You're not alone. Family dysfunction thrives in silence and shame, but speaking up is how we break those cycles. You're not selfish for wanting respect and boundaries. You're not cruel for protecting yourself from people who harm you, even if those people raised you. You're not obligated to sacrifice your well-being to maintain relationships with people who don't value you. Being capable doesn't mean you have to handle mistreatment with grace. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to treat you right, even when those people are family. Blood relation doesn't grant unlimited access to your resources, your time, your energy, or your peace. You're allowed to choose yourself. You're allowed to enforce boundaries with consequences. You're allowed to build a chosen family that actually functions with mutual respect and care. The lesson I learned through all of this is that capable was always a double-edged word in my family. They meant it as a compliment, but they used it as an excuse. You're so capable translated to you don't need our support. It meant I was strong enough to handle being neglected, competent enough to manage being exploited, resilient enough to survive being put last. But real capability includes recognizing when you're being harmed and taking action to stop it. It includes setting boundaries and enforcing them even when people you love are on the other side of those boundaries. It includes choosing your own peace over other people's comfort. The most capable thing I ever did wasn't surviving my family's dysfunction. It was deciding I didn't have to anymore. Now let me ask you, have you ever had to set hard boundaries with family members who thought your stuff was their stuff? Have you dealt with the guilt and social pressure that comes with standing up to toxic family dynamics? Drop a comment below sharing your experience, because I know I'm not the only one who's been through this, and sometimes just knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. If this story resonated with you or you think it could help someone else dealing with family exploitation, please share this video. Hit that like button if you support people choosing their peace over family obligation, and subscribe to this channel because I'll be sharing more about my healing journey and how I built a life I actually love after cutting ties with toxicity. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for not judging me for the hard choices I had to make. And to everyone out there who's still trapped in dysfunctional family dynamics, wondering if it's worth the fight to protect yourself, I'm here to tell you it absolutely is. You deserve better. You deserve respect. You deserve to be valued, not exploited. And you deserve to thrive, not just survive. Take care of yourselves. Choose peace. And remember that sometimes the family you choose is so much better than the family you were born into. Until next time.